Hey y'all, welcome to Live at Five. I'm really glad you're here. And for those of you who are going to listen later to the recorded version, thanks for doing that too. I'm sure you can tell I not only got a haircut, I got all my haircut there. My intent was just to get a trim, and I'm afraid the barber was a little overzealous, but it'll grow back, I'm sure, and you won't have to look at all of my ugly face. Some of it will be covered up for your comfort. I'm glad I don't have to look at my face all the time. Y'all pray for poor Julie. She does. So, anyway, tonight, the idea here is, excuse me, tonight we're going to talk about En Media Res. That's the title of the episode this evening. And I forgive me, it's kind of a dad joke. En media res. And let me explain, please. Of course, it's Latin, and it means from the middle begin. Okay, from the middle begin, and it's basically a storytelling technique. And you've probably seen movies that do this, where it'll start off with, all of a sudden you're in the middle of the action and you don't know what happened before to bring everybody to that point. That's kind of the idea of en media res. But I'm making a play on the word media and then also on the concept of beginning in the middle, to say that the media, the what we perceive as the media, the reporting on events that are actually going on or that are reported to go on, actually begins with the media. In other words, it begins in the middle, because because with any story, you have the story, and then you have the teller, and then you have the receiver. Well, these stories that we're hearing begin with the teller, before the story actually happened, and then you've got the receiver receiving the message. I hope I'm not turning anybody off too much with my weird sense of humor, but anyway, that's what I'm talking about here. Beginning in the middle to tell a story, and and how, what that does is it means that the media is actually controlling the narrative. I know you all know that, but I'd like to talk about it tonight, and then of course go on and take some questions and try to respond to them as effectively as possible. So let's talk about this concept of beginning with the narrative. So, in one of my many books over there, I was trained in my master's program to counter enemy propaganda. And I don't see the main textbook here that I wanted to show y'all, but anyway, countering enemy propaganda. One of the main textbooks we used was actually written after World War One in preparation for World War Two, to train Americans to conduct propaganda activities as effectively as the Germans had. And then, of course, we met the Soviets, and wow, were they good at it. They got so good at it that they didn't even have to try to tell the truth. They didn't even have to try to make their narrative match any of the facts, because people just, I'm going to say people believed what they said, but I'm not going to, that's not true. The people assented to what they said, to what they were told. They didn't really believe it. And of course, the author of the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn, he said very clearly that we cannot live by lies. As a matter of fact, he gave a speech. It's a very interesting speech. I've shared parts of it before. It's called "Live Not by Lies." It's incredibly important that we resist the lies, even the small ones, which is why I'm very proud of a lot of my friends who will stand up and they'll say, someone will say, "Hey, the sky is pink." And my friends will say very calmly and very clearly, providing evidence, "Actually, it's not. Here's what pink looks like. Here's what blue looks like. Here's what the sky looks like." So we can all see that's not true. Now let's discuss why this guy is lying to us about what color the sky is. Now, sometimes the sky is pink, like at sunset or whatever. But anyway, you get the idea that that friends of mine will, and many of you are listening right now, will just very calmly and clearly present evidence to the contrary, and then indicate that the source of the material is obviously not trustworthy. So we need to question everything else that comes from that source, right? So how does this happen? How does it begin to happen? Well, it begins to happen at the point that people begin to trust experts rather than themselves. Now, there are a lot of things that I am not good at. Okay. I'm not a good cook. I make a mean omelet, and that's about the limit of it. And even then, sometimes I need supervision. I can't play basketball to save my life. Even when I was young and in great shape and had two good knees, even then I was a terrible basketball player. Now, if you want to, put me on a field and let me run headfirst into some, side of beef and try to get the ball away from him, yeah, I can do that. That's all right. That's something I can handle. If you want to throw 90 pounds on my back and tell me to carry it to the top of a mountain and then dig a big hole in the ground and live in it for a month, I've done that. I've done it pretty well. I actually was pretty good at it. A lot of things I'm not good at, though. One thing that I am very good at is spotting the lies. Now, I hope you understand that the way you spot lies is not by learning about lies. You don't study lies to learn all the variegated forms that lying takes. You study the truth. You study the truth. You get to know the truth. You learn how to recognize truth. And then once you get really good at that, when somebody pops up with a lie, you just say, nope, no, that's not true. And even if you can't immediately counter it with specific documentation, at least you can say, that has the flavor of a lie. That has the sound of a lie. And quite frankly, if I may, I'd like to say that's what happened with me in the whole COVID propaganda fiasco back in 2020. I was a sitting delegate. I was, paying attention to what was going on. And right after the 2020 session, they waited until the end of the session, right? Because if we had been in session, we as the legislature could have demanded accountability from the executive branch. But instead, they waited till right after the session and all of a sudden declared an emergency. All right. I was the emergency operations planner in Louisiana and Maryland for many years. Worked with some great teams, and we did some great plans. We worked out some really interesting stuff. And I worked with some brilliant people and learned a lot from them. Having said that, there are specific characteristics of an emergency. All right. In the emergency operations world, there are certain characteristics, and they generally include massive destruction of private property, massive loss of human life, or destruction of key critical infrastructure. Okay, obviously the infrastructure wasn't destroyed by this illness, right? The second thing is that there weren't massive numbers of people in West Virginia dying. There was no emergency in West Virginia. Okay. The next thing is there obviously wasn't a lot of private property that was being destroyed, except by the actions of the government, which was shutting down businesses, destroying people's lives, destroying their welfare, their ability to provide for their families. And so that's where the only criterion that was met for any kind of an emergency was the government destroying businesses and locking people in their homes. So madness, sheer madness. Okay. But the thing is, I'm not a doctor. I didn't sit down and study the situation to figure out whether or not the treatments made sense or whether or not the illness was real or whether it was fabricated or whatever. That's what I did was I watched what was being said and what was being done, and I recognized it as a lie. And when you're someone who deals regularly with facts, when you insist on telling the truth yourself, when you insist on being told the truth by everyone around you, when you ferret out lies just as as an obsession, when you make it your obsession to dig out the garbage constantly on a daily basis, when someone throws a big lie in your face, you go, "Oh, that's a lie," and then you have to go back and figure out where the lie is and how it was constructed and why it was constructed, which is the most important point. You need to know who constructed this lie and what were they trying to accomplish. Now, you're all welcome to go back, look at my social media, look back at comments that were made about and to me and all that sort of thing while all of this was going on. And you will see that I very calmly, very straightforwardly, constantly said, this is false. This narrative is false. Okay? And the thing is that the average human being is more than capable of looking at a narrative and determining that it's false. What it requires is you have to pull your head out of the narrative that you have succumbed to. And you have to become intimately involved with the truth. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you don't begin in media res. You don't begin at the middle of the story. Okay. And you've heard people make this silly comment before, those guys think that history started when they were born. That actually describes fairly well a huge problem we have in our culture. The people that I meet on a daily basis seem to believe that things have always been the way they are, and seem to believe that this is the way things should be because this is the way they are. I say seem to believe because I can only go on what I observe. First of all, we have to understand that the United States of America is a vast aberration. This is not the sort of thing that normally happens, okay? Especially as it was founded, and especially as it became after the vile practice of slavery was destroyed here in the United States, and free men were finally granted their full rights and not privileges. You don't grant. The government's not responsible for privileges. We as a society secure those for each other. Anyway, we can talk about that some other time. But once free men were actually capable of securing their own rights and of recognizing that the government could not work against them to secure their rights, that is the pinnacle of world history. That's the best it's ever been, guys. Not perfect, pretty wonderful. Absolutely horrific for some people because bad things still happen. Life is still hard. Life is dangerous. And by God, there are still evil people out there. Okay. But that's the pinnacle of human history since the fall. So the idea here is that you have to understand when you are trying to figure out where our government fits in this hierarchy of possible governments, potential governments in a fallen world, which functions according to the statement of Lord Acton that power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. Where do we actually fall? Well, currently we have fallen very far from where we were at that pinnacle that I expressed a while ago. As a matter of fact, it seems that we started off kind of just wandering down the hill, looking at flowers and stuff from that pinnacle. And we said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if the government would do this for us? And wouldn't it be nice if the government did that for us? And the government said, heck yeah, it'd be nice. Absolutely. You better believe it would be nice because, if you let me do that for you, I own that now. That's it. That's it. Let me do that for you, and I own that now. And I own that not only in and of itself, but every connection that you have with it is mine. I control your access to that. I control whatever it is. So every time someone said, you know what, we should have the government do this, what happened was you turned over your liberty to a bunch of people who hate you, who, honest to God, believe that they are better than you, that they're more honest, more wise, that they understand what's really going on better than you do, and that therefore they have the right and they have the power to compel you to behave the way that they want you to, because their worldview is better than yours. So if you believe that all men are created equal, men here, of course, as I've said 1,000 times, means the human creature. So that's every iteration of man, which means male, female, tall, short, melanin deficient, with a nice tan, whatever, it doesn't matter. All men, all iterations of the creature man are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So this established list of rights that cannot be made foreign to you because they were not given to you by a government. They're not privileges that are granted to you by a group of people. They are endowed upon you. That's an irrevocable gift by God himself, by the creator who made you. So if you believe that, they believe that they know better than you. and that you need to shut up, sit down, and submit to their will because they are better than you. If you believe that, if you believe that all men are created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that it is the purpose of the government to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men, you are their declared enemy. Okay? Now, let's talk about being their enemy. So I used the term propaganda a while back. I don't know if you guys know this, but until very recently in American history, it was illegal for the government to use, for the U.S. government or any of the state governments or whatever, to use propaganda against its own citizens. Well, President Obama changed that. He signed an order that said it was hunky-dory for the U.S. government to engage in propaganda activities against the citizens of the United States, the people who own the United States, the people who formed the government of the United States to secure their own natural rights and those of their children and grandchildren. That government formed for that purpose was now free to engage in intentionally lying for the purpose of manipulating the people it supposedly served. That's what propaganda is, by the way. The use of information operations to manipulate political activities. So I hope you understand that. So let's talk about what war is. First of all, propaganda is it's an operation of war. It is something you do to the enemy. Your government has declared you its enemy. And if that's not clear, the fact that they use propaganda on you should make that clear. Okay, so war. What is war? I have a master's in national security. I've taken a hiatus from it, but I'm working on a PhD, and I'll let you know that in national security, we consider war to be. War is defined as the implementation of an operation employing any combination of the elements of power by one entity to compel another entity to comply. All right, what's an entity? Well, that's a human being, an organization, a nation, an ethnic group, whatever. That's what an entity is. So when one entity employs any combination of the elements of power, and we'll discuss what those are in just a minute, any combination of the elements of power, one element of power, three of the four elements of power, two of them, all four of them, whatever. Any combination of the elements of power by one entity to compel another entity to comply. To comply with what? Well, whatever it is the first entity wants. If I want you to sit down, shut up, and do what you're told, and I use a stick to get you to sit down and shut up and do what you're told, I am making war against you. If I use a carrot to get you to sit down, shut up, and do what I want, I'm making war against you. Okay? What are the elements of power? In national security, they're generally listed as, it's an acronym, DIME, like a 10-cent piece. Diplomacy, information, military, economics. Okay? Now, of course, domestic diplomacy is called politics, right? Because international politics is called diplomacy. I hope y'all understand that. Politics is simply the implementation of policy. Everybody thinks that politics is, the national, the Republican National Committee convention, rather, choosing. All of that are sub-elements of how politics is actually executed. Politics is the implementation of policy, law, okay? Politics, information, okay? That goes back to the propaganda I was talking about a while ago. The use of information to compel others. You can tell someone the truth, but if it's used with the intent of manipulating or compelling them to behave the way you want them to, you are using propaganda to make war against them. Okay? We all know that person in our lives who is constantly trying to make everything look the way they want it to look so everyone else will comply with their wishes. You know that guy. You know that girl. Whoever it is. That person is using propaganda to make war against you. Okay? So you got politics, information, military. Now that's, hitting somebody with a stick, stabbing them, shooting them, whatever, using force. Or the threat of force, using force to compel someone to do what you want them to do, to comply with your wishes. And then there's economics. All right, the use of any form of monetary policy, market controls, regulation of an industry, taxation, all of that is economic warfare. Okay? So if your government uses politics, information, physical force, or economics to compel you to do what it wants you to do, or to manipulate you into doing what it wants you to do, it is making war on you. Right. Okay. So if the government or elements of the government and the media are in collusion, building narratives that they either then engineer the observable phenomena to match. Are you with me? So they've already determined what needs to be observed, and then they make the facts, what's actually observable in the world around you, match that, or they simply tell you that they do. They are engaging in propaganda activities to manipulate you into complying with their agenda. That's informational warfare. Take 5 minutes, get on your computer and just look up information operations. Look up. You don't even have to get into what the CIA does. Okay, you don't even have to get into deep information operations. Just get into information operations that's used by the military against our enemies, and then compare that to what your government is actually doing to you via the media. It all begins with the media, these information operations. Okay. So once again, it's not that something happens and then the media reports it to you. That's not what happens. Okay. Now, I understand that most of us view this, and I did for a long time. Okay. Until I learned how the world really works, that, something would happen and then the media would present some skewed version of it that presented what they most wanted us to see, or that they couldn't help but see because their brains were already wired that way. And then they dumped it all in our laps, and then it was up to us to dismantle the lies, or to actually kind of understand what perspective they were speaking from. It would be really nice if that were true, if they were merely presenting skewed information based on actual facts, because they wanted us to see it from their perspective. What is literally going on is they are creating the facts. And the creation of the facts starts with the engagement of the media leaders. They help to develop whatever the message they want us all to see. And then they stage manage all of the rest of it. And then they produce a play. They produce a movie. They produce an opera for us to view. And then we go home and we say, I've been enlightened. I now understand what's going on in the world. You only understand what has been presented to you. You don't even understand that. All you know is the image that has been shown to you by people who despise you, by people who want to use you like a farm animal. All right. And media res. It begins in the middle. It begins with the middle component, the media. So I hope you don't mind my little dad joke there, but it doesn't begin with the event. It begins with the media. All right. So how are we doing out there? We got any questions? Hey, Rhonda. I'm not sure which part you're saying exactly to, but thanks for the encouragement. Anybody else have a question or a comment? This is the hard part for me, to sit here and wait for y'all to say something so I can respond to it, because I could go on talking for hours, and I get really tired of hearing my own voice. But if I just sit here and wait, then it's dead air and I'm just staring at the computer screen. So who's got a comment for me? Anybody got any examples of what we're talking about right now? I can give you one. Here we go. So a few years ago, when I was in the legislature, we had a bill before us, and the intent of the bill was to establish as a baseline for custody for children of divorced parents a 50-50 baseline. The idea being that instead of it being weighted heavily in favor of the mother, by the way, the mother is the female parent. That's the one who actually gives birth, the mother, the woman. So I know we have some people who are a little confused, not real sure about the facts on that. But anyway, so for generations, the custody issue has been weighted heavily in favor of the mother, and frankly, there were some good reasons behind it. I mean, the idea is the mother's supposed to be the caregiver, the kids stay at home, the mother raises the kids, the father's supposed to be out killing mammoths and bringing home big chunks of meat to feed the family and building the house and all that kind of stuff. But when the mom and the dad split, they're still the dad's kids, right? So he still needs to ensure those things are happening for his kids. And I understand. I mean, I don't have an argument with that. What I have an argument with is that generally the decision has been for the mother to have the 90% consideration. Generally the consideration was more like 90-10 in favor of the mother. And there were fathers out there whose lives turned into nothing but paying the mother's lawyers so they could then take away more dad time from the kids. So anyway, we attempted to address that. And while that was being discussed, that bill was being discussed, by the way, I believe it actually has passed at this point, and I'm really happy to hear that. I have a lot of friends who are citizens of the state of West Virginia who engaged in a grassroots basis and ushered that bill through. But so part of that discussion involved another delegate questioning me on the House floor about my divorce. I was married for 13 years, and my wife left me and left the kids with me, and that's fine. I love being the dad, and I did my best to fill the role of mother, but my poor kids had the world's ugliest mother at that point, but I was doing my best. And anyway, so a few years later, because I had to feed the kids, I had to provide for them, I went back into the Army after I'd been out for over a decade. I've been out of the Army for a long time. And I went back in just so I could, take care of my kids. And of course, shortly thereafter, got orders to go to Iraq. Well, when I got orders to go to Iraq, their mother showed up and took us to court and took the kids away from us. And the judge's literal statement about the entire situation was those babies, but what she actually said, them babies belong with their mama. And I said, based upon what? And she said, she's their mama. So there we go. And I was induced to tell that story on the House floor because another delegate asked me about it. And so I told the story. I'm not going to lie about it. That's what happened. But there was a member of the media sitting in the balcony at the House of Delegates who decided, instead of saying that when I deployed, that my ex-wife showed up and took my kids away from me in the court, she decided that instead of saying that, what I actually said and what she actually printed in the paper, what she wrote and what was actually printed in the Charleston paper, was that I stood up and said that the next time my wife, now my current wife, was a naval officer, that the next time she deployed, I was going to take all the kids and run off and leave her with no kids. She literally wrote this. It was published in the newspaper because she had already shown up. The narrative had begun in the media. They had already decided what tactic they wanted to use against this bill, how they wanted to defeat this bill. And they showed up prepared to tell a story that would give them that would give their side of the story to the public. You see what I'm saying? So they actually published this story, which was literally the polar opposite of what actually happened. And They had already decided what they were going to say, and nothing I could say to the contrary would change that. They did not show up looking for a story. They showed up with a story and looked for a hook to hang it on, and I was that hook. And I am absolutely certain that the delegate who stood up and asked me that question was part of the setup to get me to stand up and tell that story so that could be done to me. I'm not whining. I'm not crying. I know I'm dealing with deadbeats and with schmucks and with completely dishonest people who have no soul, no principles, no interest in doing what's right. It's okay. I understand that. I don't expect any better out of them. What I do expect better, the people from whom I do expect better, is us, we the people. Those schmucks work for us. We can't put up with their garbage. Okay? And we can't allow the media to just make stuff up. All right. So, like in my situation, a lot of my friends contacted me and said, dude, did you really say this? And I said, no, actually, I said just the opposite. And I told them the story and they said, aha, aha. But they gave me the opportunity to respond. Now, the media never did. Media never did. I actually contacted the editor of the paper and said, hey, guy, this is a lie. And he said, well, she was there. She's reporting what she heard. I said, well, I was there and I can tell you what I actually said. How about that? So that's the way things really work. So we, the people, have to actually check the facts. They talk about their fact checkers. These people lie when it would serve them better to tell the truth. They love lies, okay? And they construct them beginning with the effect that they want their words to have on your mind, on the battlefield. Okay? Just like I would construct an operation, I would build the fighting force, I would train them, I would give them the weapons and the capabilities that I want them to have, because I want that organization to have this effect on the battlefield. Well, they show up doing the same operation. They decide how to build the narrative so that it will have the effect they want to have upon you, upon the next election, upon the battlefield. And they show up and they build that effect. It doesn't matter what you or I think or what anybody says or what the plain evidence is sitting right in front of them. It's not relevant. Okay. So hopefully you guys are paying attention to that. I know that a lot of the stuff that's been going on over the past couple of years makes it pretty clear that what I'm saying is what's going on. But there are ways that you can counter enemy propaganda. And by the way, just for the record, one of the most powerful weapons in our arsenal, you're gonna think this is funny. One of the most powerful weapons we have in our arsenal is a sense of humor. Why? Well, because humor is about perspective. Okay? Humor is all about perspective. What does that mean? Well, before we would go out on operations in Iraq, I would make a point of trying to have a moment with each of my guys where we would laugh about something. Because the thing is, if you can laugh about the danger, if you can laugh about your pain, your frustration, your worry, your fear, it doesn't own you anymore. It doesn't own you anymore. So if we can start looking at these people who take themselves so seriously, they are special and they are important, and by God, you better listen to them because they are experts. They're the most expert at expertiness in the whole wide world, and you should listen to them because they are expert at experting. You get what I'm saying? If you can simply learn to laugh at these clowns, it will take away a lot of their influence. All right? So, first of all, learn to know the truth. Secondly, expose the lies. Tell people. Just, if you have to do a little research, fine, do a little research. If you have to contact the actual source, like my friends did with me, they called me up and said, did you really say this? All right. Before you go off, before you say, it's terrible that this happened, make sure it really did happen. Now, I know that a couple of times I've had people say, hey, you posted this and it's not what really happened. I've had some good friends who called me down. That's the other thing. You have to look out for your buddies. You can't let them run around saying things that are crazy and wrong. We all have to look out for each other. I have people guarding my integrity all day long, every day. People who will shoot me a note and say, "Hey, you missed this," or, "You supported this guy. Did you realize he actually said this or he did this?" And those are things I have to deal with to protect my integrity. Um, so learn to recognize, know the truth so you can learn to recognize the lies, expose the lies. All right. And then demonstrate how ludicrous the lies are so they lose their power. Now, I'm not saying you laugh about horrible things, although sometimes you got to laugh about horrible things. What I'm really saying is you demonstrate just how painfully stupid most of this stuff we're being told is. Now, I had some very smart, very well educated, very honorable friends contact me recently and say, "We have heard you say you can't trust the experts." And I responded, "I do say that. I say that often. Because what I am saying is you cannot set someone just because he's got an education or he has certain experience. You can't say that guy is providing better information than everybody else around him. You have to compare. You have to pay attention. You have to know what the truth looks like because the people who know aren't necessarily telling the truth. You have to know what their motives are, what this guy's character is. So, of course, what I'm saying is you don't just blindly trust someone because they have a piece of paper. Okay. I mean, right. You can see there it is over there, my master's degree. Okay. Well, I worked hard for that and I learned a lot. I had some amazing teachers. Okay. Well, that's just one part of the puzzle. First of all, does the guy have access to the information? Has he had experience with the information? But most importantly of all, is his character trustworthy? And then, of course, what is his motivation in speaking? Now, I've been accused recently, and I welcome the accusations. I welcome the challenges because it indicates that someone's actually thinking. And some of the things that I presented about some of my opponents or the government, the way it functions, or some people who I just happen to know are lying and stealing and trying to turn your children into slaves. And they say, "Well, you're just saying that because you want to be governor." Well, from their perspective, that makes a lot of sense because we tend to project upon others our own motivations, our own principles, right? Which has been a big problem for me because I I actually walked into most of this thinking that everybody was just trying to do a good job. That everybody really was just trying to find the truth and to uphold the principles of the Constitution. And when people would do things that didn't make any sense to me, I'd say, "Well, what is this? I know you're not stupid, and I know you read the bill. How could you possibly support this?" And then I began to understand they had very different motives from the ones that I was operating under. Very different. They wanted very different things from what I wanted. And that's when my eyes began to be opened. Okay, so when I say don't trust the experts, what I mean is you don't simply take anyone's word for anything, period. Now, there are people who have expert opinions based on lots of education, lots of experience, lots of access to information that we don't have, and a very capable mind that provides a valid analysis that leads to generally valid conclusions, but who also have an honorable, decent intent and have good character. And you can trust their analysis. You can trust their opinions about 75%, maybe. That's about as good as it gets because they don't know everything. Because their valid opinions are not always right. They're just opinions. They don't generate facts. They generate opinions. Okay. And the other thing about that is that relationship is that the executive acts. Okay. The experts are not actors. They are researchers. They are studiers. They are not decision makers. They are opinion formers. And they provide those opinions, hopefully well formed, supported by good information, to executives. And I'm not talking about business executives only, executives in the military, executives in the government, people who fill an executive function, which is a decision making and action function. And those are the people who make decisions. Now, in our representative government, what we do is we hire people to do that for us. But they don't get to do it with impunity. They're accountable for the decisions they make and the consequences of those decisions. I mean, do you really think that in the 20 years I was a leader in the Army that I wasn't held accountable for the decisions I made? I will tell you that I was ground to dust a number of times for making decisions that well, some of them I was actually ground to dust for making good decisions on a few occasions. But what we're really talking about here is when the system works. The point is we have to hold these people accountable, and we have to know the truth to hold them accountable to the truth. And the truth is never, ever, 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 not once, 0% of the time, ever the information they present to us. Because even when they provide us verifiable facts, the conclusions that they draw from those facts are absolutely wrong. They are absolutely untrue because they're not interested in the truth. They are trying to push an agenda which will end with your children being farm animals. All right. Let's see what Anthony's saying here. Bechtel is breaking ground on its $4 billion nuclear plant that's funded by Bill Gates, thanks to Charleston, West Virginia. That's coming out of our pockets. Yeah. Yep. And who is benefiting from that, Anthony? Is it just Bill Gates? Is it the people of West Virginia who are benefiting? Is it the state of West Virginia that's benefiting? What other agents are involved in this? What other actors are involved in this process? Well, one of them is the Chinese Communist Party. Look it up. Get back with me. Tell me if I'm wrong. All right. So we have about 17 minutes left. Who has something smart to say? Who has something crazy to say? Just say it. Let's talk. All right. Learn to know the truth. Expose the lies. Demonstrate that the lies and the liars are ludicrous. Provide the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Live not by lies. And even when you can't get the truth out to others and everybody else is believing the lie, stand fast. Do what you know is true. You know, my dad gave me a lot of advice when I was a kid. My dad was a pretty smart guy. Not a real nice guy, but a very smart one. And the one thing that he said more often to me than anything else, as I was leaving the house to go hang out with my friends, as I was getting on the school bus to go to school in the morning, as I left to go to boot camp, he always said, do what you know is right. That's it. He never said, I love you, son. Have a great day. You know, go out there and change the world, make everything great. He said, do what you know is right. One day when I was about 15, I said, well, Dad, what if I don't know what's right in a certain situation? He said, what do you do when you don't know what's right? I said, well, I don't know. He says, what is the right thing to do when you don't know what's right? I said, figure out what's right. He said, there you go. Do what you know is right. Folks, do what you know is right. Do what you know is right, because allowing the lies to fester, allowing the lies to be built, just towers of lies, that's what's really destroying our capability to be free. Right? They're not tying you down with physical chains. Not yet. They're binding you with lies. Quit believing the lies. Demonstrate that the lies are ludicrous. Stand up against the lies. Tell the truth. And when they chop your head off, stand before the pearly gates and say, I did not live by lies. And when they come to you and they say, hey, you know what we'd like to do is give you a nice job working for the governor, which they did to me. Don't accept their lies. All right, example. Let's see what Becky's saying here. I don't know what that first word is, but last primary we were flooded with propaganda flyers that people foolishly never checked. Is that this last primary? I would think so. Thanks, Becky. I know, and here's the hilarious part. Here's the hilarious part about that, right? Who flooded? Who flooded your mailbox with propaganda flyers? Who was the one guy who had more money coming from his owners, his handlers, than anybody else, who bought more shiny propaganda flyers and mailed them out than anyone else? Somebody tell me. I'm going to sit right here until somebody types his name. Anybody got the Jeopardy theme song? You want to play it for us? Well, Anthony, you're talking about the. That's a good point. He did send a lot out. I was actually thinking about the gubernatorial race. So all those guys. How many were there? There was a herd of Republicans running for the nomination for governor, and there was this one guy who just had so much money from his handlers, his I guess supporters. Oh, that's good, Rose. But the one guy who bought more shiny stuff and mailed it to more people and paid the post office more money than anybody else. And it was all, as Becky describes it, propaganda, just flat out lies. So anyway, I guess I'll leave that question for y'all to figure out later. But what was really funny about this was that the Republican Party of West Virginia. Hey, there you go, Becky. Thanks. Yeah, dead on the money. Ding, ding, ding. The Republican Party had an emergency meeting and decided they were going to shut their primary. Now, a few years ago, they opened their primary so that non-Republicans who were not members of the Democrat Party could vote in their primary. That sounds pretty liberty-fied to me. That sounds like the sort of thing that people who are interested in liberty would actually do. And I understand that what actually prompted this change, so that they closed their primaries, so that anyone who's not actually a registered Republican can't vote in the Republican primary. What prompted this was Doug Scaff, who was actually the Democrat minority leader in the House of Delegates, suddenly became a Republican and ran for Secretary of State. You can't write jokes like this. You can't make this stuff up. It's just madness. So the Republicans, their response is, instead of helping someone else win, which ultimately happened, but their immediate response was, instead of, hey, we've really got to get behind this guy and help him beat Doug Scaff, because Doug Scaff is not really a Republican, whatever that means. I'm not sure it means anything, but they wanted to protect their club. So what they did was they decided to shut down the Republican primary to prevent non-Republicans from voting, because what they were concerned about was the Democrats had put their candidate into the Republican race for Secretary of State, and they were afraid the Democrats would all vote, would all switch to independent or something and vote in the Republican primary, and Doug Scaff would win the Republican primary and become the Republican, actually Democrat Secretary of State. Now, of course, they didn't have any problem with Jim Justice doing that, or some of these other guys who've switched parties, but somehow Doug Scaff was the deciding measure. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So they decided they had to do this. And then they get together and they decide to do this. Are you ready for this? But it doesn't become effective until 2026. So it had no effect on Doug Scaff at all. You can't make these jokes up. This stuff really happens in real life here in West Virginia. But it gets even better, because one of my favorite Republicans in the whole wide world, a guy I love to death. I really do. I have a great deal of just truckloads of respect for this guy. And then he said something that totally blew my mind. He was interviewed by Hoppy Kercheval, which, my God, does anybody actually listen to Hoppy Kercheval? I listened to him once, and basically he was allowing someone to malign me, and then I requested to be able to answer to that, and he didn't really let me do that. So I don't have any use for the guy. I don't understand why anybody else does. But anyway, Hoppy Kercheval apparently interviewed one of my favorite Republicans, who responded by saying that we needed to make what really needed to happen was we had all these independents running around who didn't know who to vote for because they weren't members of a party. So the party couldn't tell them who to vote for. And instead they were getting all these little shiny pieces of propaganda in the mail. They were voting for whoever sent them the shiniest propaganda. And of course, my response was, when I was a Republican, everybody I knew was all about voting for the Republican. And then when I left the Republican Party and I came to know independents and libertarians and Constitution Party members, they were all about getting to know all the candidates to figure out which one of them would actually do the job the right way. And so this good friend of mine, who I love and respect, and he actually made the comment that the problem was we had too many non-party members who didn't know who the candidates were and would just vote for whoever the sent them the most shiny propaganda. It's not the independents who are doing that. It's not the minor party members who are doing that. I mean, how else do these people get elected? The guy who has the most money, as Becky obviously identified him as Morrissey, the guy who has all that money from all those corporate entities, his corporate sponsors, buys all these shiny things and has his mug put on them. And then all these Republicans vote for him, and he is now the Republican nominee. How is it anyway? So yeah, the shiny flyers, ignore that stuff. It's literally lies that they make up. They actually have a system for making up the lies that are most likely to fly in your district. For instance, when I left the House of Delegates, the Republican who ran for the seat here, Donald Forst, he actually had flyers, these glossy flyers that were sent out that said that he was the conservative guy. He was Mr. Constitution. He would stand up for your gun rights and for your baby's life and all this kind of stuff. And then he was one of the primary guys who was all in favor of the Hardy Amendment, which says, it's okay to kill babies who are conceived in the wrong way, because they don't really have, their lives have no meaning. They have no purpose. So it's okay to, murder them and then toss them out in the trash. But all of the shiny propaganda that we got in the mail said that he was, he was King Kong in the realm of defending people's constitutional rights. Amazing. And yet people fall for this. And the reason they fall for it is, first of all, the narrative tells them that it's either this or that. If you don't vote for this guy who wears the same, team colors you do, he wears the same kind of jersey you do, and then the guy who wears the wrong color jersey is going to win, and all hell's going to break loose. Folks, all hell has broken loose. All hell has broken loose. We are in free fall, okay? And neither color has anybody who is willing to stand up and speak simple truths. And they will lie to defend each other because they are dependent upon each other, because they are dependent upon the system that gets them elected. It's got to end. It's got to end. And the way that it ends is we begin at the beginning and work our way forward, instead of allowing them to start us in the middle and tell us today is when history began. And it began with this. Folks, history began with the fall. All right. History began with man refusing to recognize truth. Let's stand up for the truth. Okay? Ugly truth, painful truth, nasty truth, sloppy truth, vile, oppressive, horrific truth. Let's stand up for the truth, because only the truth will set us free. Okay? Let's quit playing these silly games. Let's quit pretending that there are any heroes out there. There are none. Let's quit pretending that one party has our best interest at heart. They don't. They have their own agendas, and their agendas are to establish their control. And I tell you what, they will work together. They will work together as a class to establish control over you, and then fight each other over control of that subclass. All right. rather than fight each other and allow us to control them. They already do it. They already do it. They will come together and fight against us. All right? The oligarchs who hate each other passionately. And I'm not just talking about the parties hating each other. The individual members of the oligarchy despise each other. You should hear the way they talk about each other. They despise each other, but they fear us and they despise us even more. So what they will do is whatever it takes together, they will do whatever little, underhanded special handshakes and, whatever they've got to do to pat each other on the hiney and work together to put us into a position where we are no longer free. Then they will fight each other over who gets to be in charge of all the slaves. Okay? Simple fact is, we the people need to get together. We need to agree that all of us are created equal. Okay? People who are pink like me, people who are nice and brown, people who are tall, people who are short, people who smell funny, people who talk funny. We are all created equal. And we need to come together on that one principle. We don't have to agree on anything else, nothing else. You don't have to agree who's your favorite author. You don't have to agree, what your favorite ice cream is. You don't have to agree in what part of the country you want to live. You don't have to agree on anything other than this. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We hold that in common. That will bind us together, and we will destroy the oligarchy. All right? If you will fight for my freedom, even though you don't believe in the way that I use my freedom, if I will fight for your freedom, even though I despise the actions you take when you use your freedom to decide what to do with your life, if we will stand for each other's freedom, they cannot stand against us. We will own them again. Once we've established that, go your way with my blessing. Live as you will. Just recognize that all men are created equal and are endowed with rights that cannot be taken from them. And any imposition on those rights is a crime. All right, let me see here. All right. Any other relevant questions? Okay, I think we're done here, guys. I got to go check on the pork loin I threw in the crock pot a little while ago. Julie is still out. We were out all day knocking doors. You can tell I got a nice tan. This is the way I tan. That's what a tan looks like on me. And I told her I had to get home and meet with you guys, and she stayed out. She's still out there knocking doors. I don't use the word